I asked my daughter, "What's the problem? Is your mom and sister okay? What is it?" She said, "It's the bathrooms, Dad. The toilets are filling up." After what Joe and I had just endured the past few hours, I didn't think the day could get any worse. Boy, was I wrong. I stepped into the house and could smell the downstairs bathroom from 10 feet away. When the power went out, we'd resorted to garbage bags inside a 5-gallon bucket. I dug a landfill pit in the backyard and would dispose of the bags and our garbage there. I didn't want wandering eyes to see our empty food cans and bags we'd been eating. When the sewage pump stopped functioning, I knew it would only be a matter of time before the sewage began to back up. The people who continued using their toilets and dumping water in to flush it had now helped to cause it back up into our houses. Marauders, foreign invaders, no power, and now literal shit flowing back up. It was now beginning to be all too much to handle. I explained to my wife, kids, and Alicia what Joe and I had encountered today. Since the start of the EMP, I'd always been honest with them, and I wasn't going to change that now. I told them, there's more of those bastards out there who attacked Alicia's family. We disposed of 8 today, saved a family of 4, and Joe was shot but survived, thanks to his body armor. My wife asked where the family is. She hadn't seen or communicated with anyone in the past 17 days since we lost Lucille, Jack, and Eddie. I told her I offered them one of the vacant houses and supplies, but they regretfully declined and were now en route to the high school. I told her I gave them a walkie and Joe and I would be monitoring their progress. She asked me with tears in her eyes, "How much longer can we stay here?" Deep down, I knew she was right. Eventually, our luck would run out. I told her we'll discuss it over dinner, which happened to be lentil soup warmed up on the Coleman cooktop. While she tended to dinner, I walked out back and was met by Bear. He was always happy to see me come back home. Tongue licking, tail wagging, rubbing his head on my leg asking for attention. I grabbed some soap and shampoo we kept next to the bucket and began to clean myself up with the pool water. I could wash the dirt, grime, and blood off, but the horrific images and encounters would remain with me for as long as I survived this. My wife brought out some clean clothes and I dried off. I spent a few minutes throwing a football that Bear would fetch that was now semi-flat from the puncture holes from his teeth. It was his favorite game to play. I'd chase after him like a linebacker did a running back. My wife called out, "Dinner's ready. Lentil soup, pickles, lemonade, and Rice Krispie treats for dessert." It wasn't a 5-star meal, but we were thankful for it. 27 days in, and we weren't starving or dehydrated. We were the fortunate ones. I knew there were millions upon millions who wish they were still alive and enjoying a meal with their loved ones. She asked, "What are we going to do?" I said I could remove the toilets, stuff some clothes down the pipes, and cover it up with cinder blocks from the backyard. She said, "No, I'm not talking about that. How long are we going to stay here? We have a vehicle now, an opportunity to leave, to go someplace safer." The thought of setting out on the road scared me. We had no idea what we'd run into. More marauders, foreign soldiers, impassable roads, but she was right. We knew what we'd be encountering here. The boots were coming, and Joe and I would be no match for hundreds of soldiers. That's when the walkie went off. It was Sean. He said they'd made it to the nursing home en route to the high school. He just said it smelled like death. Windows smashed out, most likely by looters looking to score painkillers and other drugs. Bodies littering the parking lot, being picked apart by crows. The gas station I had visited on day 1 was a pile of rubble, burnt to the ground. Vehicles abandoned on the road with doors left open where people had scavenged, hoping to score supplies. He said the scene was more reminiscent of a third world country than it was the United States. He said a Humvee was approaching. I told him to get out of there and hide. The next sound I heard was gunfire, with screams from his wife Ruth. After that, it was silence. I couldn't believe what I just heard. Neither could my family. Was it American soldiers shooting and executing their own people? Or could it be Russians? A voice then came suddenly over the walkie. Hello, comrade. Where are you? Judging by this cheap communication device, you must be close. I see you like to run on channel 22, and soon you'll be running for your life. I immediately turned off the walkie. It was Russian soldiers that were less than a half mile from our house. Bear began barking. He only did that if someone was outside. I told everyone down to the basement. Told my wife if anyone comes down through the door, you shoot first, ask questions later. She said, what are you doing? I said, Bear and I are going to go see who it was. I appreciated Bear's warning, but it was also a double-edged sword. Whoever was out there could hear him, and any dog barking from inside a house a month in obviously had a human caring for him. I grabbed my rifle that never left my side as dusk was setting in. That's when a voice called out from behind the front door. It's me, Joe. Open up. I said, Jesus, Joe. You scared the shit out of us. He had heard Sean's last call and what had happened. He didn't want to risk radio communications with the enemy now listening. He said he'd seen a drone up in the air about a quarter mile away on his way over. I yelled down to the wife and kids it was okay to come up. At this point, the four of them had had enough. I told Joe we needed to evacuate. I assumed the high school was overrun by Russians. I have a wife, 2 daughters, and Alicia to think about. It was no longer safe here. Joe agreed and said, you do need to leave. I said, what about you? He said he took an oath for this country, and he'll die defending it. I said, Joe, you don't need to do that now. He replied, I do, and I will. And if my wife is still alive, she'll come back home looking for me. I'm not leaving, but you are, and you're taking the Bronco. He said, you don't have time to waste. Start gathering your supplies. I said, Carmen, who lived 2 doors down, ran his own landscaping business and has a trailer along the side of his house. The perfect thing to hook up to the hitch of the Bronco and load up with supplies. Joe and I would wait for darkness to set in and bring the Bronco along with the trailer back to my house. I told my wife and kids to empty all the storage containers that housed Christmas decorations, toys, and knickknacks. Start filling them with all our supplies and food from the basement. The Bronco had a full tank of gas, and I had 3 5-gallon containers in the garage as well. Joe asked where we would go. I said I had the perfect place, 65 miles to the southwest, a place I knew very well. Wood Creek Campsite. I spent every summer there in my youth with my grandmother, and after she passed, my mother spent the last 3+ years of her life there too. There was an abundance of campers, 4 cabins, and a huge creek of fresh water that ran through it. I knew many of the seasonal campers there and expected to be welcomed. I knew the Russians had a large force south of me, and that was the direction I had to travel. I had a few maps in my state and would map out multiple routes in case I ran into resistance. I'd also pay particular attention to any and all bridges along the way. I fully expected roadblocks at each of these. At this point, I was ignoring the martial law and curfew warnings. Joe and I set off to grab the Bronco from the house and pick up the trailer on the way back. Darkness had now set in. Earlier tonight was the first time either of us had seen drones in the sky. No idea who had deployed them, but I was guessing they were Russian. On the walk to Joe's, I asked again if he was sure about his decision to stick it out. He reiterated he was at peace with it. He still held out hope his wife would somehow return back to New York. The extra supplies we grabbed from the same house as a Bronco were still inside of it. Joe told me to take them without hesitation. He said he would help load everything up tonight and provide watch for us. I couldn't thank Joe enough. I jumped in the driver's seat, Joe in the passenger seat, and set off to retrieve the trailer, maneuvering around cars left for dead in the street. Backed into the house two doors down from mine, hooked up the landscaping trailer to the Bronco. It was going to be another night of no sleep. I decided we'd leave at sunrise. I liked our chances better being able to see what sat around each turn, each bend in the road. That gave us roughly 8 hours to gear up, stock up, and prepare to bug out.